So I'm going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is observing the summer Milky Way. Um, One of the sad things about my talk is if you want to see the Milky Way like this, it requires a little bit of travel. This is Big Bend National Park in Texas, which is down, it's just a couple of miles from the Rio Grande and Mexico. It is really dark down there. Absolutely magnificent skies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our galaxy. This is a painting of it. I think it's fairly accurate. And this was fascinating when I went to look up the details, like how thick do you think the galaxy is as a ratio between its diameter and its thickness? And I was stunned. So it's 100,000 light years wide, but only 1,000 light years thick. And if you think about that, that's like a sheet of paper or something. The central bulge is 10,000 light years in diameter. So, I mean, basically, it looks like that. It's incredibly thin. I think the central bulge is relatively correct in terms of size. So we are in the summer, we're looking into the core of the Milky Way. This is a handcrafted galaxy with a light in it. That's how far our sun is from the core of the Milky Way. So what happens is in the summer, we're on this side of the sun. So, so we can look this way, and we're looking into the core of the Milky Way.
I don't know what you're pointing at. We see a slide only that says you are looking into
Yeah, the slides are not advancing.
There isn't a slide. I'm standing here holding a handcrafted galaxy. I'm sorry. But I'll show it in a picture. So in the wintertime, we're here, and when we see the Milky Way, we're only seeing that much. I'll try and they won't have the advantage of this beautiful homemade galaxy. I'm going to back up a little. So we are about here. The sun is about here in the Milky Way. And in the summertime, we are on this side of the sun. So sun is here, we're on this side. And because the sun is at our back, we're looking into the core of the Milky Way. In the wintertime, if the sun is here, we're on this side with our back to the sun. And so the Milky Way we see in the winter is much less. I never thought of doing this with a cursor. I went home and built this thing that took me days. So that's why it's the best in the summer. We're looking at the core of the Milky Way. And for me, it's about the wide angle views. I built a telescope called an RFT, a richest field telescope. And you'll probably say, what is that? Can you read that okay? So the answer is basically it's a short focal length telescope, and it has a fast F ratio like f4 or f5. So I'm talking about the wide angle view. So it's about focal length of the objective and the field of view. So on the top, my telescope, I'll show you a picture of it, was a homemade 10-inch f4.8 Newtonian. And I sort of drew this to scale. And you can see that it has a particular field of view. It's not calculated in degrees. below it is a Richest Field telescope, a 6-inch f4. I don't know that it works actually, but it has, if I measured the same distance out, it would be a wider field of view. On the bottom is a Schmidt-Cassegrain 8-inch f10, and you can see that it's a much narrower view. So here are some numbers. An 8-inch f10 Schmidt-Cass has a focal length of 2030 millimeters. A 10-inch 4.8 Dobsonian is 1219 millimeters. And the RFT that I built is a 6-inch f4, and it's 610 millimeters. So with fewer millimeters, there's going to be less magnification with any eyepiece you use. So here we go with the Schmidt-Cass. On top, it's a 24 millimeter Teleview Panoptic, which is a wide angle eyepiece. So in the Schmidt-Cassegrain, you get 85 power, but you only see 0.80 degrees with that eyepiece and that telescope. If you go to my 10-inch f4.8 Dobsonian, you get 51 power. But look, because it's a faster, faster focal ratio and a shorter focal length, you're seeing 1.34 degrees of the sky with the 24 millimeter eyepiece. And with the Dobsonian, the RFT, you're only getting 25 power, but look, 2.68 degrees of the sky at once in that telescope. And it's like, well, you hear the rest of the story. With my 6-inch f4, there's 3 eyepieces that I use, a 24 millimeter Panoptic, a 12 Nagler, a 7 Nagler. So I can get 25x, 50x, 87x, and then if I put in a Barlow, 174x. So, okay, it's not designed as a planetary scope, but the 7 Nagler with the 2 times Barlow, I get some nice views with that little scope. So about my telescopes. So forget the one on the left for the moment. The 10-inch f4.8 Dob on the right is one I built. Astley used to have telescope building sessions in John's garage, and he found a mirror maker on the West Coast, and he'd buy like a dozen 10-inch f4.8 mirrors, and then the secondary and the focuser and the rest. And I decided to make a truss tube design. But that was my main telescope. I started out astronomy with a 4-inch Schmidt-Cass, and then lost my mind and bought a 10-inch Schmidt-Cass, which I could hardly stagger out of the garage with. And then I built this 10-inch f4.8 Newtonian, and that's been my main telescope for years. So I think it was in 1992, a friend of mine in Ohio had made some friends in Australia, and he and his brother had gone to Australia. He'd helped out one of the amateurs who wanted to buy a big 18-inch mirror, 20-inch mirror, and my friend Ron Ravneberg helped him out, and the friend Tony said, why don't you come down here with your brother-in-law and we'll show you around and all that stuff. So Ron went down, they had a great time, and they came back, and he called me up and he said, we're going to go to Australia, and we're going to take about 8 or 10 amateurs with us, including Richard Barry, who is the editor of Astronomy magazine, and a guy who is a telescope maker. And so I knew a year in advance that I was going to go to Australia, and I wanted to have a telescope to bring with me. What can I bring on a 747 that I don't have to ship? So I designed this telescope in my head. You can see the telescope tube, going at a 45-degree angle, and the vertical part, and you can see where it turns on a circle on top of a photographic tripod. This is the other view. And I did make a shroud for it out of cardboard, but it melted in the dew. But the whole thing, it had a bag of nuts and bolts and screws which didn't bother any of the TSA didn't exist, but the security people had no trouble with my bag of screws, but in Australia they went nuts, and I had to lay all the screws out on the table. So when it's all said and done, it fits into this bag. You can see all the parts. The mirror is protected because the part that's the mirror here, there's a hinge, and this folds up, and there's an opening in here to protect the mirror. But anyhow, I was kind of proud of this, and when I got back, I entered it in the competition at Stellafane and won a second prize for mechanical design. What was bizarre, I don't mean to whine, but the first place in mechanical design was a Dobsonian that looked like the one I showed you. So I was thrilled to get second place. Anyhow, I always bring a photographic tripod with me in the eyepieces I carried in my backpack. And so I took this to Australia and went to the outback and set it up, and I was stunned. I mean, first of all, some of the darkest skies, it's in the center of Australia, and I was out there for 3 days alone. I had to go early because my daughter was graduating from college. So I went out there, I got there early, a week early, and went out to the outback on my own and took this scope, and it absolutely blew my mind, these wide field views of the Milky Way. When I got home, I built this version. The only thing I not saved because the telescope still exists in the bag, but I took the mirror out and made this with a fiberglass tube, and it's a conventional design. One of the minor things is you'll notice there's a split here. Usually the mirror box just sits on these Teflon things, but I added a friction device with 2 screws to tie it down, because sometimes I'd put a 20 Nagler on that, and a 20 Nagler, if you haven't seen it, looks about the size and weight of a hand grenade. So I had the ability to control the, it was clearly way out of balance, and I could control the friction with that. So when I came back from Australia, the first thing I did was build this. And for the next 6 months, when I went out east, I never brought the 10-inch telescope. This was so much fun to look through because of the wide angle views. So here are the 2 telescopes together, the 10-inch and the 6-inch f4. The 10-inch does a much better job, on planetary. If you want to see faint galaxies, the 10-inch, a lot of times I'll bring both telescopes with me. But I'll tell you, it was eye-opening to have a richest field telescopes. And of course, the richest part of the sky is the summer Milky Way. And then this is a new addition. A lot of you have seen this. This was a scope that Lee Naiman, who had been a longtime member of ASLI, donated, and I spoke up for it. It's a 5-inch f5 refractor, and it had it's Jaegers. And you could go to Jaegers and buy the objective, and then buy this, and then buy the tube and the rings and a focuser, and the focuser was not very good. So I bought this modern focuser and cut 1.5 inches. But I love this scope. It doesn't show here, but it is battered and scratched. It has extra holes in it, that he used it, changed things. And I finally got it to dark skies this summer at Stellafane. It was the only scope I brought to Stellafane. And once again, it's a richest field telescope. And the views were just beautiful. And what was amazing to me is it's only an f5 aperture. And many of you may know there's 2 galaxies that are, if the Big Dipper comes down like this, and here's the bucket, if you draw a diagonal this way and come out to here, there's 2 galaxies, M81 and M82. And I thought you needed like an 8-inch scope to see that, even under dark skies. And I decided to look for it with this scope, and I was stunned. I mean, you could see them. One is a spindle and one is a little more bulgy. But that was visible with this telescope. And it's an absolute joy to use. So the summer Milky Way, once again, makes me go home and cry because the Milky Way in my side yard is invisible, and I know what's really there. We look closer. I mean, it is just, I can't tell you, it is just stunning. I mean, you could see this if you went to Cherry Springs almost, I think, and probably going upstate, you'd get a semi-decent view. But, you know, if you go to the Southwest or something like that and get out of town, it is a spectacular sight to see. I went to Chaco Canyon about 10 years ago and didn't bring a telescope. I brought 16 by 70 binoculars, and all I did was scan up and down the Milky Way with the 16 by 70s on a tripod. Just for a point of reference, that's Sagittarius, the teapot, and now you can see the stars. But just so it gives you a sense of where you are in the Milky Way. So one of the absolute joys of the summer Milky Way is to begin at Sagittarius, the teapot, and cruise up from the horizon along the Milky Way using my lowest power eyepiece. The views are sublime as clumps of stars and various Messier objects move through the eyepiece field. Here's a shot from out in the Hamptons, and I think it was probably 10 years ago, but the Milky Way is pretty decent there. So there it is again. So I look through the eyepiece and I see Sagittarius, and from memory, the litany begins. 7 and 6 and 8 and 20 and 22, 17, 16, and on to 11, which is gibberish, but I'm going to explain myself. Here's a map from Richard Berry's book. So here's the open cluster M7 and another open cluster M6, and then here's M8 and M20, which are nebulae. Over here is a stunning globular that is as good as M13, and then up to 17 and 16, and then up to M11. So more about that in a second. But it's funny, I see the teapot and I start in 7, 6, 8, 20, 22. It's just something I do. This is a little closer view, M7, M6, and these can be seen with the naked eye in stellophane. And then 22, which is the globular, and then 8 and 20, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. It's like 54, 70, 69, M21, 23, M25, 24, but 8 and 20 and 17 and 16 and M11, and I'll in more detail. So this is funny. There's 7 and there's 6, and they don't look like this. They look like more stars than this. You don't see all the background stars. Of course, this is a photograph. So the photograph showed the background stars. But when you look at this, 7 is the largest one, and then 6 is much smaller. But this looks like you're seeing 15 or 20 stars, and my sense is when you look at it, you're seeing 30 or 40 stars, 50 stars in M7, and then M6, fewer, but maybe this is accurate. Yes. What? I'm sorry, what?
He doesn't know his mic is on.
Oh, sorry, I didn't get that. Thank you. Okay, so they don't look exactly like this, but they're beautiful, huge open clusters. And then this is stunning. This is M8, and it's a nebula, and this is the Lagoon Nebula. And then up above it is the Trifid, because it's divided into 3 pieces, and you can spend three lobes. You can spend half an hour just examining one of these, just because there's so much to see. I'm going to come back to that. Oh, I'm going the wrong, what am I doing? Okay. So here's M22, and it's fully as impressive as M13, although it's closer to the horizon. So there's a little more extinction, but when this comes into your eyepiece, it knocks your socks off. And then this is M17, and it doesn't look like this. This is from the book, The Messier Album. And so they do drawings, they show a photograph and then they do drawings. And this is pretty obvious in any telescope. When you look at M17, it looks like a check, or I think they say the omega figure. But it's funny because in a photograph, it looks like this. This is what we see in the eyepiece. And it's a wonderful thing to look at, and it looks different depending on the power that you use. And then this is M16, which is, there are stars and a nebula. And then finally, M11, and it's a nice group of stars, but it doesn't look like this. It's called the Wild Duck Cluster. And there's, I don't know, maybe, but it's like a V-shaped of all of these things. And I don't know how many stars there are. Anyhow, those are just like the biggies, and there's so much else to see. But the whole point is I spend a lot of time on each one of those. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about eyepieces. These are my 3 main eyepieces. When I started out, I had a 4-inch Meade Schmidt Cassegrain, and it came with a 26 millimeter eyepiece, a Plossl, which is not very wide angle, and it came with a 10 millimeter eyepiece for magnification. So if the glass opening of the eyepiece is that big in the, maybe it's this big in the 26 millimeter, the 12 was like that, and it's a little harder, the 10, I guess it was 10 or 12, a little harder to look through, but I realized I needed more power. So I bought a 6 millimeter Plossl, and the eye lens is like 1/8 of an inch in diameter. You cannot look into it without your eyelashes wiping it, thus putting greasy streaks across this thing. If you have glasses, forget it. And if you're not wearing glasses, you can only see the rim if your eyeball is, if your cornea touches the lens, you can see. I mean, I don't even know why they sell a 6 millimeter. That's ridiculous. So, so I had those 2 eyepieces, and then I bought, I think, a 30 millimeter. I had a 26. I guess I bought a 32, and then I bought an 18, and then I bought, I don't know, a 15. And it's like, I didn't have a plan. I just started buying extra eyepieces. And then later on, when I got the big telescope, the 10-inch, then I could really cut loose because it had a 2-inch eyepiece. And it felt like I had a different eyepiece, like every 5 millimeter, I had a different one. And some were wide, but they weren't wide field. And later I discovered wide fields, and then I discovered Naglers. So I'm embarrassed. I should say this. I started buying Naglers like 40 years ago, and I would save up and I would buy one, and then I'd save up for a year and buy another, and save up for another year and buy another. And basically I got something that was like a 24 wide field, or in this case, a 24 panoptic. This is like the 3rd version of the 24. And I had a 13 millimeter Nagler, which was 2-inch eyepiece, 2-inch barrel. And I started with that. And then I think they had a 12 Nagler, and I bought that. And then finally, this is a 13 type 6. And the same with the 7. I think I have 2 of those. I have this one and a smooth metal one. So I'm almost embarrassed, except I know you guys have more stuff than me. But this is, I had to add it up. This is $1,078 worth of eyepieces. And I feel badly because I don't want to shock newcomers, but you don't need to do this. But I just want to tell you my logic that I figured out. Instead of having one of every focal length, I start with a 24. Half that focal length is 13, and that'll give me twice the power. Half again is 7, and that'll give me twice the power again. These three eyepieces work on every scope I have, from a 60 millimeter or an 80 millimeter refractor to a 6-inch refractor to my 10-inch scope and everything in between. It's kind of simple, you know, you're doubling the power each time. The cost of entry, though, is if you can get wide fields, they're much more fun to use. But man, look at the price. That's crazy. So as a public service, I'll be giving you, oh no. As a public service, I started buying inexpensive eyepieces, and some of them are direct from China and some are from Amazon. So on the left is a 27 millimeter, they call it super wide angle. So that's about like the Panoptic that I have, that it's not, the field of view of a Plössl is 52 degrees. The field of view of a wide field is liable to be 60 something, let's say 67, and the field of a Nagler is 89. So when you put your eye up to a Nagler, it's like you're in a spaceship and you're looking out the porthole. So this isn't bad. It's a wider field of view than a 26 millimeter Plössl. And I think that was $30 or $40. And then I found the Spaboni, and that's a 15 millimeter, half 27, more or less. And that was $30 or $40. And they call the next one, it's a, that's funny, it says 68 degrees. So it's not even really a wide, well, it's sort of a wide field. It's not a Nagler. But I think basically you're looking at $120 for eyepieces. Yes, Chris? For which one? I'm guessing that it's probably 68. So it's not a Nagler, but my 24 Panoptic is about 68. So it's wide field, which is better than Plössl. If you want to do it right, you buy yourself a 2-inch hand grenade, which is called a 2-inch Nagler, and it's about that big around and weighs as much as a hand grenade would, and it's 89 degrees. Anyhow, I want to stick with 1.25 inches. So it's not hopeless. Each one of these eyepieces is better than a simple Plössl, and they do a nice job. The object was that I thought I'd take a chance, spend $40, and I could report back and say, I bought some relatively inexpensive, I mean, a Meade Plössl was like $89, and this is half that. So the sense is, yes, you can find eyepieces that are not an arm and a leg. If somebody wants to try some of these, and I have a couple extra others, different focal lengths, but it's possible to buy some of these $40 eyepieces, and they do a really nice job. So that assuages my guilt after showing you $1,100 in eyepieces to show you $120. So here's my observing strategy. Let's say I'm going up the Milky Way. I'll pick M8 as a starter. You know what it is. It's a gaseous nebulae. And my thing is to look at it with the 24 Panoptic, the wide field, the low power, And with that, I'm getting a sense of place. The object is there, but there's a lot of room around it. And then I kind of go, what's around it? What is its setting? Is it in a forest? Is it in a desert? That doesn't make sense, but you get the idea. What's the context? What is it? So I spend time looking, and you can spend a fair amount of time looking at these objects to see, you saw that it's a very complex thing. So after I've done that, and maybe I'll spend 5 or 10 minutes doing that, I take that eyepiece out and then put the 13 Nagler in, and now I move closer. I see it with more magnification, but it still has some room around it, a fair amount of room around it. And I look carefully, and I cannot explain this. It looks different. Can't explain it. It just doesn't look the same in a wider view as it does in the closer view. So I spend another 5 or 10 minutes with M8 because it's not just a star cluster. And I really, try paying attention to it. Take that out, put the 7 Nagler in, and now M8 fills the screen, and I can see all kinds of detail. And because I'm seeing more detail, it looks different again. Can't explain it. Magnification probably has something to do. But I was amazed when I discovered this. So it isn't like, oh, take a look at M8. Oh, yeah, cool. And then somebody walks away. It pays to spend the time looking at it under different magnifications. And then there's one filter that I like to use. I won't use it on star clusters, but I'll use it on gaseous nebulae. And it's called the light pollution filter. The name of it is UHC, ultra high contrast. And what it does is it filters out some of the background illumination and just lets certain lines of like hydrogen or something come through. I'm not good at explaining that, but it lets the light from the object through and holds back all of it. Has like a couple of notches in it, so it takes light pollution out of the air and lets the object look so much better. Here are a couple of them. This is an Astronomical UHCE, and this is a fainter effect. I've tried to use it in my side yard. Sometimes the UHC filters out too much, and this is a plain UHC filter by a different manufacturer. Here's one, for example. It's an Astronomical, and it's 1.25 diameter, and it's $100. But I promise you, it really does a nice job. I should say it works okay on a 6-inch. It works better on an 8-inch because you have more light. It looks really good on my 10-inch. But if you have it, you screw it on the end of the eyepiece. So it gets a little complicated. You're looking, okay, I've seen it, take the eyepiece out, screw this on, put it back in, and spend time looking at it. It's interesting. They are filters that are made with many coatings. Tony's company has made filters like this. I don't know, I'm just going to pick a number, like it has 12 coatings on it. Okay, it's got more than 12 coatings, and they put something in between them. There's interference and all that. So they look like mirrors if you look at them this way. And if you look at them this way with the light coming through, the O3 is a much stronger filter, and I can only use it on my 10-inch scope and only on really bright objects. But you'd be amazed how wonderful the UHC here, which is not marked, the difference that it makes in the object. I don't know if you can read it. Astronomical UHC, first choice for astrophotography and visual observing. enhanced contrast and detail in deep sky objects. So it transmits O3 and H beta, eliminating scattered light, including light pollution. It's good in urban and dark sky conditions. So this is a simulation. That's what it might look like in with the naked eye under dark skies, and then it looks like that with the filter. And I got to tell you, when you pop that in, it's like, whoa, what just happened? So, you know, it's another $100. But if you buy the cheap eyepieces, that's easy. Yes, Shannon.
Just wanted to say that I didn't realize that we could see nebula from here, like where we live. But we had our 6-inch refractor, which is like really, really long. And Dan put that UHC filter on it, and I could see the Orion Nebula, which was really just crazy. Not like over the course of the night, 16,000 hours of just like seeing it, and you could
With your eye,
see it.
yeah.
That was something.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a worthwhile filter. So I recommend it for visual observing. The worst part of my talk is that, you know, I can't see the Milky Way from my side yard. I used to go out to Custer and see the Milky Way on a good night. And then there were like several years when I'd go out and I thought, oh, it's not a good night because I can't see the Milky Way. There must be haze. There must be smoke. And finally, Steve Bellavia said, no, it's all the shopping centers. You know, 24 used to be a, you know, country road, and then boom, the big box stores and all the lights and the rest. So now if you want to see the Milky Way, you continue on to Orient Point, and there's a boat ramp out in the weeds, which is creepy if you're not with somebody. But we can see the Milky Way from out there. So I kind of hate to sell you a bill of goods, but you can go places like Cherry Springs or Vermont or up the Hudson River, Ashokan Reservoir, and you can see some of these things. So I'm a month late. I was supposed to do this last month, but my daughter arrived, one of my daughters arrived at Los Angeles. So I'm a month late, but it's still up there. The Milky Way is still up there, crosses the meridian at 8:30, which is nautical dusk, which means you can see all the navigational stars, which means it's pretty darn dark. And in another half an hour, where it's only going to move a little bit, you'll have astronomical dust at dusk, and it's still going to look magnificent from a dark sky.